Good afternoon. My name is Akil Ross. I am Superintendent of School District 5 of Lexington and Richland counties, and it's an honor to have you here for our Lunch and Learn on this Tuesday, May 17, 2022. This is an opportunity to review a proposed bond referendum to get your ideas and input. This is the second of a community-wide, but we have presented this this proposal to our advisories, faculty advisories, and to our community advisories, business advisories, parent advisories, and student advisories. So we're taking this out to the community at large. We want to get community feedback and honor that feedback as we work to get the best outcomes for our students, our teachers and staff, and all to the good of educating our students for their futures, not our past. And so I am excited to have you join us today. Before we begin, I want to also let you be aware of more opportunities to give your input. We are doing a community input meeting at Irmo High School. This will be tomorrow, Wednesday, May 18th, from 5 to 7 in the auditorium on what we call Main Street right there at Irmo High School. We invite you to come out. This is in person, hosted by our district and our architects, LS3P. We are looking at a way to get your input as we look at honoring the history of Irmo High School and also addressing its future. And so we would love for you to come out to give your input of how we take that proud tradition of Irmo High School and move it forward in the new wing. Now, this project, the Irmo High School project, the additions to the Chapin High School Stadium are not part of the proposed bond referendum. This was efforts by our school board to address community facility needs in the fall. And so we're excited about the $50 million that was allocated towards this project. Again, this is not a part of the referendum. This is moving forward. We're excited about it, and we would hope that you can join us again Wednesday, May 18th, from 5 to 7. This is in person to help design the future of Irmo High School. What we want to talk about today is the objective of our school district, and that's working with the community to ensure that all of our students are ready for their future. And that's academically, that's social emotionally. And so we are looking to get your input today. We operate, as I say, as a system, making sure that we are getting those outcomes that we seek in our mission statement. But it all starts out with asking and answering three critical questions. The first one is, why do we do this work? The second, the mission question, is how do we achieve this? And the third is, what have we created? What have we actually produced? And so when we talk about the vision of our school system, we have been excited to hear from over 900 employees, teachers, faculty, and staff of our school system. And with a common voice, they say, we love and we grow our students. Our administrators work tirelessly through a strategic planning process to come up with a mission statement that ends with academic and social emotional growth and development of our students. But it's important to know, community, that as we talk about these facilities, as an educator, we have this mission to accomplish, and our resources that we use, it's important that they allow us to accomplish this actual mission. And we have challenges to this mission. I'd like to go over 4 challenges in this presentation. The first challenge of the 4 is mental health's impact on education. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reported in February of this year that 1 in 6 of school-age children are experiencing a mental health disorder. That if you are in that cohort, that you're 3 times more likely to repeat a grade. Mental health is having an impact. It's a challenge to our mission. The second challenge to our mission that we struggle is poverty's impact on proficiency. Now, these dots represent a statistical analysis called a regression chart, where we list all of the elementary schools in the state of South Carolina, the blue dots representing those in the Midlands, and we plot them based on their performance on the y-axis and their poverty index on the x-axis. And what do we find? That after a statistical review and an analysis of the regression, with 71% accuracy, or you can predict the performance of the school based on the poverty index. Or more simply, 71% of the variation in these scores can be explained by poverty. So this is the second most important challenge. What are we doing in School District 5? Well, we are working to continue or to build a whole child continuum, an umbrella, if you will, to protect our students and now our staff from all of the impacts that can have a detrimental result on these academic outcomes, on our mission. And we're trying to make sure that there's no gaps in this, so that everything from your physical safety to your social needs, to your mental health and behavioral skills and academic readiness, that all of that is taken care of, and that there's someone there to assist the child so that they can meet the academic needs that we are so excited about working through. And that is at the center of our mission, at the center of our vision. As we go into I'll spend the next few minutes talking about the last two challenges to our mission, because these two center around providing a safe, secure, and equitable learning environment. And that's what brings us to this potential bond referendum. Because the goal of an administrator or a superintendent is to follow the national policies, the state policies, and the board policies. And our board policy says that when it comes to the resources, the physical resources of our district, our job is to achieve the greatest educational returns. I just showed you two of the challenges that are impacting these greatest educational returns. I would like to go over two more that are impacting us under this phase of the mission. And that is the facility quality, or quality of facility. And the second one is school capacity. So what I'm going to present today are 4 options that address facility quality, and 4 options that will address school capacity. And they're interrelated, but depending on the options and the phases, they can be totally separate. The 4 options addressing the school facility quality are proposed to be addressed with a bond referendum. And so that's where 3 of those 4 options are involved. The 4 phases addressing the school capacity, one of these phases is not contingent upon a bond referendum. And these have to do with rezoning and moving of schools. So again, we're going to talk about 4 options and 4 phases. And we'll go through these so that you are aware of all of them. So let's start out with where all of this information comes from. How do we get to these options? How do we get to these phases? Well, they start out with a master's facilities plan that has 4 guiding principles: community analysis, facilities needs assessment, enrollment projections, and our instructional plan, trying to achieve the greatest academic outcomes. And we take all of that and we create our plan. And this is the plan that we present to try to achieve those greatest educational returns. And so I call this plan Building a Strong Educational Foundation for School District 5. And that is important because from a community lens, You know, we are a system. We're a family. We're 3 different communities, but we're all in the same family. And so we may have different needs. If you grew up in a house with 2 other siblings, you know that you have the same mom and dad, same house and address, but you have different needs. And so we want to make sure that we have the right fit for everyone, that we are using our resources to make sure that everyone can achieve through that promise and pledge that we make each and every day in our school district. And that's that we provide liberty and justice for all. And so we're going to have some interactivity throughout this presentation, an opportunity for you to respond back and to give some feedback, to ask questions. And I'd like to start out with one of the first questions that we have through a poll. And that question is, in which attendance zone of School District 5 community do you live? Again, which attendance zone of the School District 5 community do you live? Thank you for, and we'll have other opportunities to add in a poll, but as we look at our community and you talk about where you live, you'll realize that as we talked about the poverty's impact on proficiency, um, that the distribution of poverty throughout our district is not the same. This is an example of just how that changes based on where we live in our communities throughout our district. Now, District 5 is said to be one of the wealthier districts in the state of South Carolina because the South Carolina average poverty index is 60%. We are at 45%. So yes, but it's not equally distributed across the community, across the district. If we were to drill down into almost neighborhoods, you can see how School District 5 has that unique ability that it has to address the poles of what the state has in terms of community makeup, specifically when it comes to poverty. If you look at the difference between Lake Murray Elementary School and Seven Oaks Elementary School, that's a 70% difference. As we stated earlier, when it comes to elementary school literacy, that a regression of last year's South Carolina Ready scores that measures the English language arts of our elementary school students showed that poverty explains 71% of the performance that we have. This is a lot of resources that need to be in place in order to meet the needs of our students. And as we layer mental health, poverty and proficiency, and now school quality, it is abundantly clear that we can't further disadvantage or further, uh, um, uh, I think disadvantage is probably a better word, these schools and these communities. And so when we look at the 2019 district-wide facilities needs assessment by MBCon, we see that the majority of the facilities that were rated poor or fair are in those areas of high poverty. We don't want to further add another layer, and so this proposed referendum allows us to address that. So when we look at these layered impacts, mental health, poverty, facility, and capacity, we know that it has an impact on outcomes. We know it further degrades our ability to get those greatest educational returns that we're obligated to get. We saw in the latest U.S. News and World Report the disparities of outcomes that we're seeing. Layering all of these items on a faculty becomes hard. We have great teachers and great staff and great leaders in our eastern area. But the resources needs to be there to give them that lift above those items and those things that would suppress their achievement. And this is hard to work in when you have to overcome these issues. The majority of our resignations are coming from one part of the community. The investments in this area will prove that not only are we able to use education to change the lives of our students and to improve the effectiveness of our teachers and staff, but we can use education to transform families out of poverty and not perpetually serve those in it. This shows the difference with our poverty index in 11 years in our school district. These investments that we propose, we believe will help us transform this map, where we're seeing that without having anyone leave their neighborhood, that we can actually improve the economic outcomes. That's why one of the things I'm excited about at Irma High School is the small business incubator that gives kids, especially from these communities, the opportunity to learn and earn from today's economy right now as small business owners. So there's a lot of excitement and momentum building towards transforming families out of poverty. But how do we do it? What's the instructional model that we use? Currently, it's this model where you take that map and you look at those communities, and we take these 10 elementary schools and we move them into one intermediate school and then back out to 2 middle schools and on to their high schools. Whereas in Chapin, there's almost a vertical articulation from K to 12. Sixth grade, as our amazing teachers at Crossroads Intermediate, in fact, Ms. Westfall, who represents our district as District 5 Teacher of the Year, shares with us the amazing transformations that can happen at Crossroads, and that they're masters of transition. That sixth grade year is very important. And so what I have planned to do with community input, with staff input, is to take that transition model and move it from this form of delivery to this, where each of the middle schools, or the Dutch Fork Middle School and Irma Middle School, will get their own sixth grade academies. And in this sixth grade academy, you'll have the opportunity to take that Crossroads transitionary model, but it would be within that K-12 alignment. It will allow us to map back, to vertically align, to articulate from K-12, to build those communities so that we're building and using our facilities to get the strongest educational outcomes. But that's just the flow. If you notice, the conditions of the buildings have changed in this model. No longer are there any poor or fair rated schools. And that is what builds us to, or brings us to, the notion of a bond referendum. Now, previously, prior to our public input, we were advertising, and I'll say I, if it's a bad idea, it's mine. I was advertising this model where we had previous funding for the district office, but we were going to add on to that a professional development wing for $4.7 million. The sixth grade academies for Dutch Fork Middle and Irma Middle would allow us to empty the Crossroads site. The Crossroads site would be a swing space for Nursery Road and a early childhood center. Once Nursery Road was fully remodeled, we would bring in Harbison West Elementary School to that site, and the proposal was looking at the value of the land to sell it. But at that point, we put this out for community input, and we heard great input from the community. We heard from the Harbison Association. We heard from people at the Quail Valley Civic Association. We heard from alumni and staff. We heard community input, and we have listened to that input, listened to that the concerns about how that land was provided to the district, what it means to have that as a community school, and we have changed, and that's why we're meeting today. Your input makes a difference. And so if we look at after public input, this is the model that we are bringing forth at this time. And your input may, again, change it before it's presented to the board next week. And that's why we're meeting today. So the plan is, as of now, after this first round of community input, is to still add a professional development wing. We need to be able to train our teachers. We want to keep and retain our teachers. When a teacher leaves School District 5, it's between $14,000 to $20,000, depending on how long they're out, to recruit and bring in a new one to replace that teacher. So it is important that we are pouring into our teachers and staff so they're prepared to address the needs that we see today and beyond. That Dutch Fork Elementary and Irmo Middle, we continue to get their sixth grade academy. So that the Crossroads faculty and staff, I had a great opportunity to meet with them over 2 days, and we talked about how they're going to transition their program into Irmo Middle and Dutch Fork Middle. We will still use Crossroads Intermediate as the renovation swing space. Moving in Nursery Road into Nursery Road is complete. It'll be Nursery Road at Campus I at that time. Once Nursery Road is fully remodeled, Nursery Road will go to its school, and then Harbison West will move into the Crossroads site. It will be Harbison West Elementary at the Crossroads site. If you are a student at Harbison West, you will find that with additional space that those students will enjoy access to additional programs. Like right now, they don't use science labs because the science labs are classroom. They will have walls. They'll have a remodeled space, and so it'll be a better educational space. But for the Harbison West campus, the current campus, that will stay within the District 5 fleet. And that will be our early childhood center. It'll be the Harbison West Early Childhood Education Center. And it's perfect the way it's built. We can secure the upper property, that lower area that we would have so much trouble securing would again not be, we would not try to fence that in, but the upper area we could protect. And we would have the open concept works better for early childhood education. It allows us to expand those CERDEP funds to provide 4-day, all-day programming for that end of our district where it's really needed. Needed all over the district, but really needed there as we look at poverty's impact on proficiency. And so with that, we would now need to start to work on addressing the growth and Chapin. We would move the alternative academy for success from, or the academies for success from Spring Hill, the 5 program from Piney Woods, and adult education from Irmo, and those would go into the Dutch Fork site, which we would propose to call the Rosenwald Rich Lex building. If you're familiar with the history of this community, that was the name of it before it became Dutch Fork Elementary, and build within the Dutch Fork Elementary zone a brand new Dutch Fork Elementary School. I've had a great time talking with the faculty and staff of Dutch Fork Elementary School, listening to their concerns about that site as an elementary school. serves better as a secondary school. It gives the Academy for Success its own recreation space, gym, cafeteria. It's going to be receiving major upgrades this summer. With the road improvements coming in front of it, makes a better secondary site than an elementary site. And so after that, we address the security upgrades at Seven Oaks Elementary School. Chapin High School receives a fine arts building in parity with the other high schools. And Irmo and Dutch Fork receive stadium improvements or upgrades to be in parity with the ones that we're doing at Chapin High. So we're really excited about these projects, and we're really excited about the public input and how that drives our decision to get a better outcome to take to the board. So with that, the question is, well, where does all this money come from? Well, I think it's important to note that we have three major pots of funding: federal, state, and local. About 6% of our budget is federal, 47% is state, 46% is local. And we receive our local funds from a millage, which is a tax on real estate and other property within our school district zones. And we have two different ones. We have an operational millage and a debt service millage. Now, when we talk about this money, $150 million, we're not talking about funds that can pay teachers. That's operations. And that comes from majority are 6% assessed properties, investment properties, businesses, and the like. What we're talking about is debt service millage. Bond referendums and buildings are about debt service, which is construction, technology, equipment. This money by law cannot be spent on salaries and benefits. It has to be spent on construction, large equipment, and renovations. When we look at Act 388 and they say, well, I raise my family in our school district. What do my taxes pay for? Well, after Act 388, there's a 100% rebate for 4% properties for those primary houses, meaning that for every house built in our community, pays virtually nothing towards paying teachers, paying staff, or benefits. However, what we do pay for is we do pay for construction. We do pay for technology and equipment. Now, if you have a business in our community or you have investment property in our community, then the lion's share of supporting schools sits on those type of properties. So as a result, when we look at options, we want to provide options that would help. We have inflation. We have high CPI. We know the talks about the economy, and so we want to make sure that we are being good stewards of the public's trust and coming up with options so that we are not overhitting these 6% properties. So when we talk about a bond referendum, the definition is the general obligation bonds that we sell to pay for large capital projects, again, buildings and major renovations. And so when we sell these bonds, they give us a spending card. And we can have the spending card that goes up to 8% of our total assessed value. But if we wanted to go over, if we needed a spending card or wanted to sell bonds at 8.1% of our total assessed value, the voters have to approve. And so that brings us to our options, because the total assessed value of all the properties, assets in School District 5's attendance zone is $586,383,014. So in option one, we use our spending card, borrow up to the 8% value, and we have $46,900,000 to address our facilities. But we have used that for Irmo High School. The board knew that there was issues at Irmo High School and used that to address those facility needs. And so we thank the board for that, but with option one, we'd have to wait till all that's paid down before we can work on the other buildings. Option two, we go over the 8%. This is 58% of the total assessed value. And we would have $340 million on that spending card. That's how much bonds we would sell. This would require an increase in taxes in order to pay for this. So we would ask those 4% properties and 6% properties to pay more debt service millage in order to pay down the debt we would have on the district. And then there's options 3 and 4. Options 3 and 4, we go to 26% of the assessed value, but there would be no change in taxes for option 3. So the 4% and 6% properties would see no change in their tax bill because we would use our existing tax collections to service this debt. We can actually, under option 4, drop about one meal, not 1 million, but 1 meal, and still there would be a small decrease in taxes. We would extend the debt out longer, but we could actually lower taxes and still be able to service $150 million of debt. So under these options, it's important to know that bond referendum does not necessarily have a tax increase. I think it's synonymous, right? That we think bond referendum, we think a tax increase. But you don't have to raise taxes with a bond referendum. I know people have asked, well, why would you go through all this if you're not going to raise taxes? We wanted to provide options to our community, and these were the options that allows us, I think, to give our community enough information to make the best choice. So when we think about these options, option 1, we take no action on the remaining poor and fair rated facilities because we've already borrowed the full amount of our 8% to address Irmo High School. And then with that, we address the growth through rezoning or portables. Or option 2, we borrow above our means or above our millage, and that's the 340. If you've seen earlier representations of this presentation, you saw the 2 stars that represented no inflation. Now we're at 3 stars. We have done new estimates to represent inflation. And we can borrow at our means. There's $0 debt servicing tax increase. And we address all the poor and fair rated facilities. Or with option 4, we borrow below our means or millage. There's a small debt service tax reduction. That does have a longer payoff and interest, but we can still address all of our poor and fair rated facilities. So at this time, we're going to move to some poll questions to get your feedback. Which of the following new construction projects is most important to you? Which of the following new construction projects are most important to you? All right, thank you so much. We have another poll question we'd like you to answer. Which of the following building modifications is most important to you? Which of the following building modifications is most important to you? Thank you so much for your feedback. We have a few more poll questions we would like for you to answer, but we want to do a little bit more explanations of exactly how this works. For those who are interested in the math, we thank our financial advisors, PFM, for putting together these graphics. What you see here in the gray represents our existing debt. This is debt that we previously had from other our annual maintenance programs and borrows that we've done, general obligation bonds that we've sold, again, under that 8% cap. And so this line, this dotted line represents our capacity under our existing tax that we levy, our existing debt service millage. And the distance between the gray bar and the line is the available monies that we can borrow. If you go over the line, you have to raise taxes. If you stay under the line, then you don't have to raise taxes. The question is, how much do we borrow without going over that we could use to service our buildings? Now, this is our existing. Let's look at option 2. If we look at option 2, we'll see that there is no line. Because we would have to indeed raise taxes from 69.5 mils to as high as 103.68 mils to service the debt. And you can see how it would be what's the estimated millage or tax that would need to be assessed or levied in order to serve the debt. And you said, well, Dr. Ross, we've jumped from gray to some additional colors. What do these represent? Well, the yellow, which is not a part of the referendum, is the Irma High School project. And so this allows us, again, we were under that line. This allowed us to address some immediate needs we saw at Irma High School. The red represents our annual maintenance. We have to maintain buildings, air conditioners, roofs, floors, windows. We're constantly repairing our buildings, protecting them from wind, rain, and so we're always trying to upgrade and fight against upgrading the buildings. So that red will always be there for our annual maintenance. And blue is the potential referendum. So blue would be the money needed for the referendum. Again, there's no dotted line because in option 2, we would need to go above it in order to service the debt. If we look at option 3, we see the line returns, and that's the barrier. If you stay under that line, there's no need for a tax increase. You go over that line, there's a need for a tax increase. But because the line is there, the amount that we can borrow is reduced. And so that blue represents how much we could borrow and how much we would service to pay it back up to 2038. And that would be $150 million. Again, we're under the line, so there's zero tax increase. We would stay at 69.5 mils. If we look at option 4, option 4 goes to 68.5 mils. You can see that in year 2027, we do go over the line a bit. And so in that one, that board would have to do some assignments to make sure that we would have additional money to bring that within bounds in order to not ask for a millage increase. And that can be managed. We're taking a very conservative line growth of 1.5% a year in order to service this. So that's how, in a very layperson's way, we're actually addressing the finances there. But that's the options. We need to talk about the last part, which are the phases. We need to talk about the growth. Because bond referendum or not, we need to address the growth and the use of our facilities in our school district. And so if we look at the distribution of in-person enrollment from 9 years ago, we saw that 9 years ago, 25% of the students showing up to buildings were in Chapin. 38 were in Dutch Fork, 38% were in Dutch Fork, 36% were in all of Irmo schools. Look at that number today, this year. Now 38% are in the Chapin schools, 30% are in the Dutch Fork, 31% are in Irmo. But the buildings are not where the students are. 6 zone schools in Chapin, 7 zone schools in Dutch Fork, 8 zone schools in Irmo. And so regardless of if we have a referendum or we don't, we need to address this notion of capacity. How many students do you have in a building before that building is reached its operational capacity? Now, some will say 100%. If the building is zoned for 1,700, you don't talk about a new school until it's at 1,700. But I always venture out to say those have not run a school before. When you look at hallways, when you look at transitions, cafeteria, when operations become impacted, when the capacity, the playground space, the movement of students through the halls and into rooms, into the cafeteria, out of different transitionary spaces, we start to lose the operational and I believe the ability to return the greatest educational outcomes. Some of our schools we have a school, Lake Murray, at 93% capacity, Chapin Elementary at 81. If you look at the intermediate, middle, and high schools, you see that Chapin Intermediate School is at 85%. That Chapin High School sits at 90%. And this is based on a 135th day enrollment. These are the numbers that we use for our budget. When we talk to teachers and you talk to administrators, how full do you want your class? How full do you want your hallways? How full do you want your gyms, cafeterias, and playgrounds? And they say between 80 to 85%. That's when we start to lose that operational effectiveness there. When we look at our projections, they're almost spot on for Chapin. This is demographer's work that we've done, and to see that the fastest growth is going to happen in the 5th grade at Chapin Intermediate, 6th grade at Chapin Intermediate, that Chapin High School over the next 10 years, 21.7% increase. We know that something has to happen to address the growth and the direction. What I'm hoping is that if a referendum passes, if we're able to address the facility needs and Dutch Fork, looking at the remodel of Dutch Fork High School, and where a new Dutch Fork Elementary School, renovations at Dutch Fork Middle School, renovations in Irmo Middle School, the Crossroads building, and its Nursery Road, Harbison West, early childhood. If we do these renovations in the east, that families would move to all parts of our community, all parts of our great district. And so as we look at how do we address this, we do have options. If we do nothing, we could put portables at the schools that are having the highest level of growth. But it still does not address core capacity space, playgrounds, cafeterias, gymnasiums, hallways, and the like. And again, I believe as the instructional leader that does not allow us to get the greatest educational outcomes. But this is a community decision. So we want to present some phases. Phase 1 is how we currently exist. This is the bond referendum fails, and we look to service high growth areas with portables. Phase 2 bond referendum passes, but we service high growth areas with portables. Phase 3, bond referendum passes, and because growth continues, we look at adjusting and rezoning the Chapin schools, with one school leaving the Dutford cluster and the rest of the schools staying zoned as they are. And that's Ballantyne Elementary. And so in this phase, Ballantyne Elementary would be moved into the Chapin cluster. Up to 518 students who are zoned for Dutford High School would continue to be zoned for Dutford High School, unless proximity to Ballantyne causes them to be zoned for Chapin or for Ballantyne. But with that, we could bring all of the K through 5 into elementary schools. And then in Chapin, we could have actual middle schools, a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade building. Now, to accommodate that, Chapin Intermediate School would turn into Chapin Middle School. And Chapin Middle School would be proposed to be Spring Hill Middle School, all going into Chapin High School. The rest of the district would stay zoned as it is. Now, what happens if Chapin High School goes over its capacity? Opening up taking the Academy for Success and having it at the Rosenwall or proposed Rosenwall building or Richledge building, the former Dutch Fork Elementary site, will allow us to have more seats that went from Chapin High School into Spring Hill High. And this would allow us to stay under the that large capacity at Chapin. However, if we cannot do that, we cannot maintain that, then there's the option of phase 4. Phase 4, if the bond referendum passes and growth continues in Chapin, then we would introduce the 4th phase of the 4th cluster, which would be Spring Hill High School. Now, Spring Hill High School is unique because it's a whole school magnet. And so elements of its magnet program would have to change because it would now be zoned. But this is an opportunity to, again, look at some of the phases, to communicate to the community what we are looking at in terms of the options that are in front of us due to the conditions, not of tomorrow, but of today. So if we look at our last question that we would like or last 2 questions we'd like to ask you before we take questions. The next question is, if the referendum passes, which phase do you prefer? Phase, again, deals with growth. If the referendum passes, which phase do you prefer? Thank you so much. And then I'll bring us up to if you were the board of trustees and I'm bringing this to you to make a decision, I want to hear from you, your thoughts. What option would you select? Or what option would you recommend for our board of trustees? To take no action, and we can deal with growth through rezoning and portables, to go above the millage with a $340 million bond referendum, to borrow at our current millage rate with $150 million, or to borrow below our millage still would have 150, but we would move to 68.5 mills. So with that, our last question is, which of the options before the board do you prefer? Which of the options before the board do you prefer? Awesome. Thank you so much. And we, again, are taking this input, we're taking this data, and we're using your input to help us make the best plan. We are schools and communities. And this is no greater example of a school and a community working together to hear input, to bring that input back to our community, or back to our board of trustees, so that we can make the best possible decision. So the last poll question that we're going to ask today is, how would you prefer to be notified of these planned updates? If we are to change anything, how would you like to be notified? Thank you so much. At this time, what we're going to do is I'll stand for some questions that you have. I take them live, and we certainly appreciate having this feedback. So thank you so much. We're going to ask Ms. Laura McElveen to join us as we field questions that you have submitted. And again, you can continue to submit them. If you don't have questions right now, you want to submit them later, you can do so at communications@lexridge5.org. Again, if you have questions or thoughts, those can be submitted at communications@lexridge5.org.
And as you mentioned that, one of the questions that was submitted to that communications email earlier today was a question regarding the Academy for Success. And I believe that you did address this question when you were talking about if it possibly moves to the Dutch Fork Elementary site, would the new location have a functioning cafeteria for the students that would attend the Academy for Success?
Awesome. It would not only have a functioning cafeteria, but it would have their own space for fields and basketball courts and softball. It would have a gymnasium. We are putting through energy savings, that red bar and capital, new HVAC, solar panels, windows. It will be a great space for instructional delivery. My concern is its space for an elementary school. There will be 5 lanes going down Broad River, and it actually moves from I-26, if you're familiar with this area, all the way to Chick-fil-A right here by the central office. And that is something that will drastically change the face of that building. So more suitable for secondary.
And we've had a couple questions regarding any possible renovation plans scheduled for Leapart Elementary or Seven Oaks Elementary.
So definitely Seven Oaks Elementary will, within that MB-Con plan, will receive its security upgrades. Remember, under options 3 and 4, we're limited to how much we're able to borrow. We're trying to stay under that cap, stay under that line in those options. So any school that wasn't rated poor or fair under that line would not get addressed. We're only doing the poor and fair rated facilities. If we do option 2, if the community and the board goes with option 2, then yes, there would be changes at every school. Every school would receive some type of upgrade or renovation.
And we've had a question talking about if you do have a plan for like some security upgrades for Harbison West Elementary, is there any talk of just keeping it as Harbison West Elementary, not doing a child development center, and keeping it just renovating it, fixing the school, and keeping it as Harbison West?
Well, we would still have to move in order to fix Harbison West, just like Nursery Road. You have to move the school, you have to move the students. You cannot do that type of work. And anyone who's remodeled a kitchen knows that when you tear down walls or you start to gut a place, you don't really need to be in there, and you can't have students there. Once we remove them to that new swing space school at Crossroads, we have to fix Crossroads up to be an elementary school. So right now we are not doing the best with the public's trust to spend money to upgrade that to an elementary school, and then move them back into. We would run out of funds at that point. So again, trying to stay under that cap. This is the best plan, I believe. And then with security, it works much better as a early childhood center that we would have there. I think one of the things that I would ask when we think about Harbison West Elementary School is look at the current operations inside the building. It's a beautiful. It's the history of that school is very important to us. And I totally understand that, but I want us to think about the children that walk and ride to the building or a bus to that building, the experience they have inside of it, that our art classes are used for classrooms, that our sciences are used. We are really impacting the work that we can do. So what I like to see is when Harbison West transitions to the Crossroads site, we could expand programs like Escalores. We can give access to science labs and different kind of spaces at its new location, and then really serve the needs of our early learners, our 3 and 4K learners at the Harbison location. For those who live in that community and want their kids to ride and bike and walk to that location, they'll still do it, because that's a shuttle location. But looking for the best educational returns, I believe our plan is the best that we have with the funds that we have or we're proposing to use.
And we've had a number of people with questions regarding Ballantyne Elementary and their current location of Ballantyne Elementary. If things were to change, we've had some questions about, will my children be grandfathered to Ballantyne Elementary if we're told to go to another elementary school? Can you talk a little bit about the talks that are, underway regarding Ballantyne Elementary?
I like how you phrase it, talks that are underway, right? Because we haven't picked an option or phase yet. And so we have to pick a direction in which to go. But in that, we're talking about 5 years away. So we're definitely grandfathering. This is a phased approach. We're talking fall 2025, so maybe 4 or 5 years away before that would come about. And you would end up phasing people out or phasing out. But I would also understand that too, this does not have, depending on the direction, the demographer is going to have to talk to us, because it might not be all 518 that are currently zoned for Dutch Fork are leaving. Some may be because of proximity to the current facility, they'll still go to Ballantyne. We have to consider all operational items like our bus transit, and all of that. So I would say that, of course, there's a discussion of grandfathering, but our proposal does not have that transitioning happening into fall of 2025.
And we've had a question regarding the funding, and they were wondering, why is the current limit 8%?
That's a great question. That's state law. All schools in the state of South Carolina, and I'm going to operate. I'm not our CFO or our bond attorney, but all school districts are kind of limited on that spending, and so it allows us, if we wanted to go over that 8%, we have to come to you and ask for that. Even if we can pay it with our current millage, we need to do that. You're assuming debt, and it may last longer. It will last longer than the superintendent and the school board. So if the community says we'll take that on, then it doesn't lock up future boards and future superintendents to decisions made today.
And we've had, obviously prices of everything is going up, inflation is up. We've had a question wondering, is this the right time to be making these decisions? Can we wait a couple years? What's kind of some of the reasoning behind the timing of some of all of this?
That's a great question, because what happens is the cost on our side actually will continue to rise. So today it's 150. Tomorrow it's 350. It's 250. We don't know, but we know the trend is going to increase. Every year that we wait, we don't see prices fall. We don't see those costs fall. But what we do see is interest rates increase. We do know that the only tool, you go to Economics 101, the Federal Reserve's only tool to check inflationary impact on the economy is the increase in interest rates. We were so fortunate when money was virtually free, right? The interest rates were as close to zero as you could. Well, borrowing became easy. When RGO bonds are how we sell, as the cost of borrowing increases, that is what we have to tax in order to pay. So more money is going to go towards interest the longer we wait. So we have two imperatives. We have our ability to address facilities. If something's worn out today, it's going to be more. It's going to cost more to fix tomorrow. Plus, what we see in terms of the increase in the price to borrow, that will continue. So I believe if I came with this project or this proposal 2-4 years from now, we're not looking at the same amount, or we're cutting projects off to address it. I think that is the reason we're in this situation now. We have so many needs in this district. This district office that we're in right now, a quarter of the building has been surrendered to mold. So we're talking about life safety items that I don't know if legally we could say we're going to wait on.
And we've had, a question regarding rezoning, and that we have had, a study done on a rezoning plan. So is there any, would we use, some of the recommendations for rezoning when we're, coming up with some of these plans, or would it take the place of anything that we're currently talking about?
That's a great point. I think that rezoning plan dealt with Chapin, specifically Piney Woods, not the full district from Seven Oaks to Piney Woods. So yes, elements of that will be used. Depending on what option though guides what the plan will be. I don't want to do 4 different rezoning plans. That would not be best for the public's resources. I think the best thing to do is to come up with what direction do we want to move into, and now let's build around coming up with the details of that plan.
Okay. Let's see. Are there any opportunities for skills training in construction, HVAC, or other collaborative ventures with tech schools?
They are, and I want to thank you for that question. In our initial um, referendum projects, we were going to expand the technical school to have the School of Residential and Commercial Construction. That has been cut as prices have increased. And so now we lean to dual credit offerings at Midlands Technical College. I think the fastest way out of poverty is through skill of hand. Mr. Priggy, who is our Director of Career and Technical Education, is working to put these programs in place. He's even meeting with elementary schools and middle schools on how to create that pipeline. I think that's one of the best programs and projects we could ever do to make sure. You're going to be hearing a lot about that in the coming future about these dual credit offerings. We met with Dr. Rames of Midlands Tech to create a task force. And when that task force reports out, you're going to be really excited. One of the things that we were really excited is our first jobs initiative at Irma High School as a pilot to start getting students job training positions. We want you to be trained as a HVAC tech and a plumber, an electrician, bricklayer, welder. But we also need you to know how to show up to work on time, to be efficient with your work, to understand why a business works. That small business ownership is really dependent on great quality workers. So working with students on how to work, not only just having the skills, but how to work is part of the work that we're doing through First Job. So we're excited about that and combining those two, being certified, but also being a great worker and contributing that ad valorem, that bringing value to the work that you do.
We've had a question. We have a couple questions regarding the sixth grade academies for Irma Middle and Dutch Fork Middle, and they're wondering, will they have their own cafeterias and gyms? If not, how will those additions affect capacity?
Yes. So the cafeterias won't be reproduced, but the gyms will. So they'll have their own gym, their hallways and buildings, their area, and so that would expand the capacities. When it comes to the cafeteria, because of the cost of cafeteria equipment, we could not reproduce that in these academies, so they will eat lunch, a sixth grade lunch in each of these spaces. So, and the notion is it helps them transition. One of the things we learned when we talk with the Crossroads team is they have been for many years developing how to transition these sixth graders and to work around those particular needs. What we're excited about is this allows us on the same campus under that same culture to flow them right into the 7th and 8th grade. So we're excited about it, but they will still have their own academy, their own space, but they can gradually release into their middle school. So to answer your question, they'll have their own gym, but they would their cafeteria, they would have a sixth grade lunch in the existing cafeterias of those buildings. We would, because of that, specifically at Dutch Fork Elementary School, Dutch Fork Middle School, at Dutch Fork Middle School, we will be expanding their cafeteria because we can use the sixth grade academy gymnasium as their stage area, so that we could have more seats for the sixth grade lunch at Dutch Fork Middle School.
And as we're talking about these middle school academies for sixth grade, we've had a question about the staff at Crossroads. What will happen to those staff members?
Great question. So we met over 2 days with Crossroads staff, and they know they follow the students. they're given options. All positions are saved with the exception of one. And I've talked to that person, that's the principal. I cannot duplicate the principal there. So Dr. Doty is the only one that needed a one-on-one talk with me about the transition. The rest of the positions are going to either go to Dutch Fork or to Irmo, and the Dutch Fork Middle or to Irmo Middle School. It's first self-selection. We're going to put both plans in their media center and allow them to self-select. Some said, well, Dr. Ross, I live closer to Irmo, and I would rather be at the Irmo campus. Others told me that their children are in the Dutch Fork zone, and they'd rather be at the Dutch Fork. So we'd have them, they would select which academy that they would want to go into, and then we would move to assignments by seniority from there. The other one is needs-based. If we have special educational students who, for instance, have special needs, then that skill set goes to wherever that student is zoned. So if you have a student, whether it's a feeding issue or a respiratory issue, there could be speech, blind services, deaf services, whatever that particular need is. If that student is zoned for Irmo and that certification needs to go with that student, then you'll follow the student. So every job is secured because we need teachers, we need staff, and so they're going to follow the students to the need.
And staying on the same topic of these sixth grade academies, this question was submitted, but it may be a little premature and you may not know the answer, but they're curious, would these students operate on a bell schedule that's an elementary bell schedule, a middle school bell schedule, or is that just something that if it happens, we will address and go from there?
That's a great question. The notion is that they would be on a sixth grade bell schedule that works with that sixth grade campus. Knowing that, and this is a question that the staff at Crossroads asked. They want to keep the flair, what they've built, their culture and climate, and I agree with that. And so the only constraints are constraints that you would find when you're building a school operation site, lunch. That has to work with the larger, the breakfast program, the lunch program, the dismissal and arrival times. So you have flexibility within that. If students are going to use a larger space like the band room versus a band lab in their academy, then those things will work. But the principal has that responsibility to actually align those responsibilities. But when you look at an academy, they're separate, but and slowly integrated. And you're in the middle of our program in the sixth grade. Not really elementary, you're not really secondary. And so this is a great opportunity to help them with the transition. They are, part of the culture and the climate, and it allows us to build stronger vertical articulations in these sites.
Well, let's shift now and talk a little bit about growth in the district. We've got a question from somebody who's wondering, are new neighborhoods going up in the Irmo and Dutch Fork attendance zone like they are in the Chapin zone?
That's a great question. I would probably have to defer to the demographer on the particular stats. I can only give you anecdotal, and what we're seeing is that the majority of the new construction is going on in the Chapin cluster. And that's what we are seeing, this massive growth. We do see, I can tell you, if you look at the types of housing, that changes. While you have a lot of the housing developments going up in the Chapin area, we're seeing more apartment complex in the Irmo. For instance, as of right now, data, there are 0 apartment complexes in our Chapin attendance zone, 3 in our Dutch Fork attendance zone, 29 in our Irmo attendance zone. So we're just seeing the I would again like to go to the demographer for a more drill down on how this is. But in terms of the anecdotal, the housing developments are in our west. The more high density apartment complexes are in the east.
And can you talk a little bit about the source data that you're using? I guess, you have where certain schools are rated fair, poor, excellent. Where is this data coming from? Just some of the sources of the data that you're using in this presentation, where it's coming from.
Yes, you'll see in the presentation of the footnote, we noted the 2019 MB study of all the facilities. It rated 24 facilities in our school district, and of that, you saw the 4 that were poor, the 6 that were fair. We outlined those in the yellow and the red there. 10 that were good, and the delta were in excellent condition. And so addressing the fair and poor was kind of the minimum of option 2 and 3. I'm sorry, option 3 and 4.
And just to provide some clarification for everybody who might have missed at the beginning, where you were talking about how we did take feedback from our last forum and kind of tweaked a little bit of the proposal and the presentation to get everybody's feedback. And so they're wondering, they want to be clear, Harbison West Elementary campus and the property are no longer for sale.
No longer for sale. I want to thank if I start calling names, I'm going to miss names. I want to thank the Harbison community, the Quail Valley Civic Association for how they participated. I know some of the media said there was an outrage, but that's not our community. They're in partnership. They came together, sat down with me, and just went over some history. We had a good discussion to let us know that we seek your input to make sure we get it right. And so I am saying that I am not proposing to sell Harbison West property. It will stay in the fleet. It will always have a educational purpose within our school district.
Okay. Let's see. We've had a question about how many years, how long do we have to pay off certain debts?
That's a great question. Now, I like how you said certain debt, because we will always assume debt. But you can see in 2032, when that previous debt that we have assumed in the Irmo project falls off, you can see more spaces going there. But we're going to service the 150 all the way out to 2038. If you go with option 2, you can still service it in 2038, but it would just take a lot more. It would take more debt service millage in order to service that out. So we're in the 15-year plan here in terms of servicing this debt.
And this is a quick question. You can just remind everybody from the very first slide that you did about Irmo High School. He's wondering, what specifically is going to be done with that money. So it's a great opportunity to invite everyone out tomorrow night to Irmo High School.
Well, you did a great job of answering that. So you're right at the top of we have another community input meeting. That will be Irmo community input meeting, and we're asking you, just like we're doing today, we have some ideas. The small business incubator is one of the things that we're really excited about having at Irmo High School. This is an opportunity. Not every child is going to college. Not every child wants to go to college. And some of the ROI, return on investments on that doesn't really work out for everybody. And so how do you leave high school and have options that allows you to be good contributors to our society, good citizens, but also able to participate effectively to the local economy. And a lot of that is starting your own business. Taking your eventually, we like to see you leave Irmo High School, leave Dutch Fork High School, Chapin, Spring Hill with your own associate's degree. But at this particular school, where you have 2 years to work on your business model, to run your own company, to hire a staff, to make payroll, and to learn the issues of what happens when you miss payroll, to have your business fail, and then to learn from that, and then build anew. We're really excited about incubating the great ideas. So the I is for innovation in Irmo, and we want you to come out tomorrow from 5 to 7 and help us design the future.
Very good. We've had a question, and I guess if it says, how many seats would be open at Spring Hill High School if the Academy of Success is relocated? Would that change the capacity at Spring Hill?
So the capacity at Spring Hill stays the same. It's just that it now allows us to have more seats go to Chapin High School. So again, but right now the Academy for Success takes 1 wing, 2 floors. If those wings and if that wing and those 2 floors would be used to essentially offset the growth at Chapin High School, we wouldn't necessarily need to zone Spring Hill. So Spring Hill has a capacity of 1,700, just like Chapin High School does. And so it allows both schools to have a school utilization rate that is not in the 90s, and that would allow those schools to stay. Without zoning Spring Hill, what we could do is some very creative programming at the middle school, which we would start choice kind of early. What's important to note that under that plan, you don't take away seats, the Spring Hill seats from Irmo or Dutch Fork. We would just increase seats for Chapin. Again, not taking away seats for Irmo and Dutch Fork. We would just increase seats for Chapin.
And staying with this topic of Spring Hill, if it were to become a zoned high school, what would we do about sports since there's no athletic facilities there? And if we were to add them, where would that funding come from? How would we do that?
That's an amazing question. The truth is, we would have to share facilities if the bond referendum did not pass. If it does pass, you would start to see, regardless if we zone Spring Hill, you would start to see year after year, we would add athletic programs under the red bar, under the annual maintenance. We would add, we would start out with one field and then a track and then stadium to track under the football field. We would start to slowly add out athletics there, even though it was a magnet program. In the event that it became a zone school, the facilities are there. But without the referendum financial space, we would have to share facilities. So, the question that Dr. Lofton and I were discussing is, well, if you put athletics at a magnet school and it doesn't become zoned, have we wasted those athletic facilities? And the answer is no. You could, as we see in models around the state, have an academic, like academic magnet in Charleston, the Mayo School. There's a lot of schools that are magnets that have athletics. So it would not be a waste, though that site has, I don't know if you know, but when it was built, it was designed with an athletic package there, just wasn't built out. So we could slowly build it out if the referendum passed, so that if it turned zone, we would have facilities. If it didn't, then Spring Hill could still do athletics. We would apply to the high school league that it would open up as an academic magnet school and run its own athletic program once it's built out. So there are options there, but without those options, we go back to life safety maintenance, and we would end up sharing facilities.
Will Harbison West, if it becomes the Child Development Center, will it only house 4K, 5K? What age students will that house?
That's a great question. I know my focus would be the 4K all day, maybe 3K as well. Once you hit kindergarten, you would go to Harbison West at the Crossroads site at the Campus I, depending on how you know Irmo, but on the St. Andrews Road location. So again, I will leave a lot of the detailed planning to. I know there's some crossover, but when you're in kindergarten, this becomes the funded. These are the state funded programs, and so those state funded programs will be in the St. Andrews location.
And we've had a question about the transportation for students that would live like in Quail Valley to go to Harbison West Elementary. Would there be multiple access points to board buses to get to Crossroads, especially with the 4-lane road they would have to cross?
No student is going to cross a 4-lane road. We even with students, we're not going to do that with elementary school students. They will have and I know there's certain students that do have the crossing guard there, but with elementary students, we drop them off from the location of the pickup onto campus. Specifically, our early learners. So we do want to, once a decision is made, we can give more detail on what those routes will be, because we can give specifics to our transportation department of how those routes would run. But we're not inclined to have neighborhoods walk across the St. Andrews Road.
And I know that our transportation director, Dave Wiseman, is a wizard and can make things happen. So I know that once the decision is made, we will make it work. I guess
we'll the best in the business.
Yeah, we'll throw out one more quick question and then we'll probably have to wrap it up. Somebody was wondering, if Spring Hill were to, be a zone school, would it then add like the music and arts to it?
So you end up getting a full complement of programs. And so that would be band, orchestra, dance. And so it's, the full complement. Drama program series, all of those choral programs would be at Spring Hill. And so if you walk the building, a lot of those spaces are already there. There's the dance room, there's the orchestra room, the band room. All of those spaces are already built in to Spring Hill. It would now be programming those out.
And last one, because I think you could probably answer this really quickly. Would the Early Childhood Center on the campus of Harbison West serve the entire district or just that cluster, the Harbison West feeder area?
Right now, we would go based on need. That would be something that we would use SERDEP funding, which allows us, it's based on need and access. It provides us additional funding for staff. And so by having it need based in the Irmo area, I think it would mainly address that. And then with available space, we could look at other areas of the district, but mainly it would handle the high poverty communities.
Okay, well, it is 1:30, so we have met our time. So if there's anyone that does have an outstanding question that maybe wasn't answered, because we did get a bunch of them, we tried to answer as many as we could, please send an email to communications@lexrich5.org, and we will work to get an answer for you. And this recording will be available later today. We will share it, and look forward to answering anybody else's questions through that email.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, and thank you, members of our community. We are schools and community. This partnership is to make sure that the 17,286 students that we're in charge of, serving their families of Chapin, Dutch Fork, and Irmo, that they receive the best educational outcomes, because they will be our community tomorrow, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best for them today. We thank you for joining us in this partnership. We look forward to your input and making our community to continue to be that place that people want to live and to raise a family and to learn. So thank you so much, and I look forward to this input as we seek our vision to love and grow all students.